keep is a public file that we have to keep populated and current with licensing information and a whole host of transparency requirements so that the general public, because we are using your airwaves, they belong to the citizens of the United States, and we have to demonstrate, both commercial broadcasters and public broadcasters, that you have a right to this information. So we're required to keep these public files, but that itself is a process that you have to go through in updating. So there are time schedules where certain information has to be updated, you know, over a certain period of time. So for instance, we as public broadcasters have to make you aware of everybody who is donating money to create a program. Not the guys you necessarily see in between programs that say this, Bob's Bargain Barn has supported public television for 15 years. But if Bob is giving us money to create New Mexico in Focus, we're going to have something that says, this program brought to you in part by Bob's Bargain Barn. And there will be a note in the public file that says, Bob gave us $5,000 for the creation of New Mexico in Focus. So that you, the public, know that's where the money came from. So if you got a problem with New Mexico in Focus, you know who's helping to pay for that. This really is important in the commercial side this time of year, this time of the election cycle, when politicians are starting to spend money on political advertising. Commercial broadcasters are required to keep a file of every dime that is given to them for political advertising, and by whom. So you know this politician gave this NBC station this much money for advertising. Now, we don't have to do that because we're not allowed to do political advertising. The FCC doesn't even let us. So we don't have that entry into our public file because we're not allowed to sell political advertising. However, our lawyers did tell us, you ought to have a note in there for the FCC that says we didn't do any political advertising, so that they know that you just didn't forget to enter something, that you actually have something there. Now, on the financial side, three big areas that we deal with. UNM, and I kind of described that a little bit in the beginning, that UNM requires us to follow their auditing software and their auditing procedures and their financial procedures and purchasing and what have you. And the public audit, we are required to do two somewhat different audits a year. One is through UNM just for the normal financial auditing purposes and for transparency, and we put our audit our financial statements up for everybody to see on our website. That's something that's required by the CPB, by the way. And then we do an audit for the CPB, and we spend a lot of time trying to get those two audits to mesh, because this is where you get a lot of conflicts just in accounting rules. Those of you who are accountants or have that background, the CPB defines certain things differently than normal accounting processes, so we have to find ways to reconcile that. We actually have now an office specifically for auditors because they spend so much time in our building making these reconciliations happen. They actually have their own room, the auditor's room, because they're there that often. But the CPB...
Does it have a lock on the outside or on the inside?
It doesn't even have a door. They come and go. The CPB is really the big dog here, and I kind of described a little bit that they have this really, really impressive... I hated it when I first started dealing with it because it is so stressful and so strenuous and so much work for us to go through. But they're giving us a substantial amount of federal dollars every year through a community service grant. So the CPB is set up as this firewall, and they get this money from the federal government, and it's their job to equitably distribute it. And they have this fairly complicated formula for every station in the country, and you plug the numbers in, and out comes a number, and that pops out, and this is how much money you, Station X, are going to get. But one of the big parts of that formula is what they call the NFFS, the non-federal financial support. Essentially what they're telling us is for you to receive money from us, from the federal government, you need to prove that your community values you, that they see quality in what you're doing. So, one metric would be, are they giving you money? Because if they're voting with their pocketbooks, that demonstrates value. So every time somebody donates to KNME, okay, and they do, let's say they just say, I'm going to give you $10 a month for the next 12 months, great, $120, and we can count that as NFFS. If they call us up and say, hey, I'm going to give you $120 for that DVD, we have to minus out the cost of the DVD, the fair market value of the DVD, and what's left over is what can be used as NFFS. Okay? If a Bob's Bargain Barn says, I'm going to give you $5,000 and you're going to run so many spots, we have to minus out what those spots would be worth on the open market, and the rest of that, the net of that, would be NFFS. If some some private foundation says, we love what you do and we're going to give you $100,000, if you know anybody like that, please call me. We're going to give you $100,000 to do what you do, that $100,000 is counted as NFFS. And we get to aggregate all of that. Even the state funds, the funds that we get from the state. And that's something that's been argued over a lot recently, because we know that states get federal dollars, and then they will give us dollars. And there's an argument over, are you getting federal dollars when you're getting money from the state? And how do you figure out how much that is? And we don't know, the state doesn't know, but it's an argument that is ongoing. But anyway, they keep track of all this non-federal financial support. They say, basically, it comes down to this. For every $6 you raise on your own television station, we're going to give you $1. And that is demonstrable, quantitative, and qualitative proof that we are of value to our community. Now, I hated this when it first started. One, because it's the 6-to-1 ratio, and I thought, we should get more, come on. But the other part of it was such a laborious financial auditing system to keep all this straight. But as I got to know the system and I realized what it really meant, I realized this is such awesome, tangible proof that we are of value to our community, because they are giving us enough money that we get $1 million, about $1.2 million, from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting every year. And that is slightly higher than average for a station our size. So to me, that's a metric that we're doing pretty darn well. Our community values us. They're actually giving us more than average than the average public television station out there. So it's tangible proof. But in addition to that, they look at qualitative measures as well. So when I do this talk, that card you gave me, that's how I use it. I will be able to provide this as an outreach effort. All right? I went out into the community. I wasn't asking you for money. You're not giving me money. I'm not spending any money. I'm just out there providing a public service to the community by educating you on what happens in public television. When we hold our science cafes and we take 15 minutes of a NOVA program and we bring a UNM or a Sandia employee out and they talk about that NOVA program because they're a particular expert in that field, and we got 120 people who show up at Los Poblanos to see this happen, that's a community outreach effort. And that, again, is tangible proof that we are of value to our community. So we report that. When we do ready-to-learn programs where we bring teachers into a conference room and show them how to use kids programming to help teach kids to learn better and faster, that is an outreach effort, and we report that. They're not as quantitative, although I can count the number of bodies in the room, and we provide that as well. But it's really a qualitative experience, and the CPB is looking for both. And that all gets, I don't know how they figure that into the formula. I haven't even sat down to figure that one out. But that all figures into that funding formula as demonstrable proof that we are providing some level of quality, enough of a level of quality to the public that we deserve some money, some of that pool. The online experience. This has changed our business and is changing our business fundamentally. The online world, when I started, this was back probably in the early 80s, the mid 80s, the first time I heard the term convergence. Back at that time, they were talking about the convergence because the internet was in its infancy, but people knew, and a lot of people could see the potential for what was coming down the pike. And they started talking about the convergence of broadcast and the internet. We're here. Okay, the convergence is now. It has been happening really in its full form since about 2009 when television made the transition to digital. And all of a sudden, smart TVs started being built where you could watch something on YouTube as easily as you could watch Channel 5. It has taken eyeballs away from us. It has given eyeballs to us. So we have spent a lot of time looking at the experience of viewers in their homes with the internet as accessible to them and video from the internet as accessible to them as broadcast. And it's really made us look at what quality means in that world. But there are all sorts of parts of that, right? There's the web page, there's social media, there's YouTube, which is a huge one, live streaming, which is pretty new, and then Cove. Cove is essentially the PBS version of YouTube. It's a YouTube that was built specifically for PBS stations, and I'll explain why in a minute here. So when you look at our web page, the viewer experience, this is part of what this whole dynamic used to be, what they call lean back. I still do that a lot. You get your glass of wine, you get your remote control, you put your feet up, you lean back, and you watch TV, and it just flows towards you. And you got a remote control, so the most activity you're really doing is changing channels when a commercial comes on where you're bored with what's going on. But it's a lean back process.